Hello. Hi there. Welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series, The Guiding Voice for a Better Future. This podcast is to help professional students, IT employees, and entrepreneurs to shape their careers. Dear listeners, in every episode, we interact with industry experts or academicians or leaders or coaches across the globe to drive some insightful conversations that will help our audience learn great things. Also, we share an interesting trivia or a fun fact about the IT world or technology towards the end. Thank you for tuning in. This is Naveen and with my co-host Sudhakar. So folks, many a times, irrespective of what level of experience that you have, we are often scared about something. And do you know what that something is? Probably an interview. Irrespective of how senior level you are, irrespective of what position that you hold, the moment you come across this word interview, probably it creates some sort of nervousness, some sort of creates butterflies in the stomach, so on and so forth. And especially when you are attending interview along with few other co-applicants, then it might also lead to some sort of peer pressure. So today we have picked an interesting topic about cracking interviews while dealing with the peer pressure. And we are pleased to welcome Nidhi to our show.
Nidhi Belani is the founder of Success Talks, a coaching academy for candidates who want to improve their interview skills so that they can find their dream jobs. In her previous life, Nidhi was a cabin crew with Singapore Airlines for over 10 years, and during this time, she has picked up relevant and powerful skills. Nidhi was also assigned the role of a trainer to train the best candidates and also was involved in the recruitment process to pick amongst the hundreds that apply to be a part of Singapore Airlines. Nidhi, welcome to our show.
Great. Thank you so much, Naveen and Sudhakar. It's a pleasure to be on the show today. And before we start, I do have to say that I'm in love with the name that you guys have for your podcast, The Guiding Voice. I think it's a very good name, very wisely selected. Immediately got my attention for sure. So thank you once again for having me on the show.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you for taking time, and we are looking forward to the great conversation that we are about to embark. So, Nidhi, we know you worked as a cabin crew, but can we talk briefly about your overall career journey and how your current venture, Your Success Talks, came into the shape?
Sure. So yeah, that's going to take a little bit of a while for me to tell you. I actually started working when I was 17. My husband thinks I'm a workaholic and I'd like to think that's a great thing. I started working with Wipro and I was a communications trainer back in India. So in 2007, I got an opportunity to become a cabin crew with Singapore Airlines, something that I've never thought of doing. But my sister, who used to be a cabin crew with Air India, and she's still actually a cabin crew with Air India, was the one who actually pushed me to try out this venture. And that got me to Singapore in 2007. But then, I was just telling Naveen, Sudhakar earlier that once a trainer, you're always a trainer. You're always a facilitator because, you have that coaching spirit inside of you. So I flew as a flight stewardess for 4 years. And then, I decided to join the training team with Singapore Airlines. I was very fortunate at that point in time that they gave me this opportunity because when I applied to become a trainer with Singapore Airlines, actually, they only used to allow the leading stewardess and above. So if you're a supervisory crew, only then you can become a trainer. But then I told them that, I'm really good at this. Just give me a chance. And, let me prove myself. So they put me through the interview process and then, I got selected and I started training with Singapore Airlines. So I used to train on safety, security, customer service. We used to do dry runs, wet runs, a lot of different stuff, cultural training and things like that. And then along the way, I got my supervisory position. I became a leading stewardess. I was training at the same time. I used to do a lot of things with Singapore Airlines. Actually, my colleagues back in Singapore Airlines used to say I should actually find a home in the training center because I used to be there all the time. But eventually in 2017, my flying career came to an end. And that's because I actually broke my tailbone on one of the flights. So, I couldn't possibly fly for longer durations. And then I met my husband, who was okay to marry someone with a broken tailbone. So I was like, yes, let's set the deal. And so that's how Singapore Airlines and flying career came to an end. But then I always knew that I wanted to do training. I always wanted to be part of a coaching team. And then I decided, why not I start my own coaching academy? And that's when I decided to focus on this particular niche because I realized there were a lot of people out there who were doing trainings, but there was no one in the space where people were guiding cabin crew aspirants, and there were a lot of them out there globally who really wanted to become cabin crew. So I started my coaching in 2017 by actually guiding cabin crew aspirants to clear their interviews. And that's how the YouTube channel came about from the education perspective. That's how the Instagram and Facebook and everything came about. Along the way, we realized that people who come for our coaching don't just clear cabin crew interviews, they actually end up clearing regular interviews as well, because the kind of skills that we impart in our coaching is very valuable from that perspective. So that's how the whole name interview specialist came about, and I decided to be an interview specialist where I can help people to actually, achieve their dream by getting through the interview process, which, as Naveen just mentioned, is one of the most nerve-wracking things for most people, regardless of whether you have the experience or you're a fresher. So that's how the whole Success Talks and the Coaching Academy in Singapore came about.
Wow, that's an illustrious and inspiring story in itself you got there, Nidhi. Starting from flight stewardess to trainer with the workaholic, or I would want to call that as passionate about what you want, what you do, ending up with setting up a coaching academy, not only for cabin crew, but also for everyone. And like Naveen mentioned, this is something that is evergreen, right? Even if you are an executive president and you want to appear for a CEO position, I'm sure in the initial first two questions, there will be some butterflies and there will be some nerve-wracking situations. So I'm really glad that, we are having this conversation, and our audience are going to love every aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So Nidhi, why do you think people generally fail in these interviews?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And of course, something that usually people ask me all the time. So currently, I do have a community of close to 50,000 people who follow me on social media platforms, including, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And this is the first thing that everyone asks me. I went for the interview and then I failed. Can you tell me what went wrong? How can I actually improve myself? So I'm going to give a very generic answer at this point in time. This is something which is very personal to everyone, because, why one person fails in an interview is very different in comparison to why someone else will fail in the same interviews. It's a very personal process. But then just to keep it very, very general for everyone here, I'm actually going to break it down into three aspects. I'm going to talk about before the interview, I'm going to talk about during the interview, and I'm going to also put a little bit perspective on what do you do after the interview, just to, put a little bit of perspective of what could be done if you want to succeed in your next interview. So when we go for interviews, as you said, this is important for everyone. One of the most important things that most people don't really focus on is that they treat every interview as the same interview, which means that, when, for example, for my students, when they go for different airline interviews, so if you're going for Qatar Airways, or if you're going for Singapore Airlines, or if you're going for AirAsia, or if you're going for Vistara, for them, they actually think of the interview process as the same because it's just another job interview. They don't really focus that this is a job interview for Qatar Airways. This is a job interview for Singapore Airlines. This is a job interview for Vistara. So that is one of the most important things that people fail to realize, that your preparation has to be based on what you really want to achieve. Where do you want to be? So if you want to be a cabin crew with Qatar Airways, you have to prepare yourself accordingly. So your research really, really plays an important role. So that's one of the things that people don't work on, especially before the interview. And one of the other things which I feel is really, really important is the preparation. So research is part of preparation, but also practice is part of preparation. So, obviously when you're going for an interview, you would know probably based on the skill set that you're required to have, you would have certain set of questions that you would be asked, right? Now, the focus is so much on practicing those questions and giving answers to those questions, but the focus is never on the feedback. So what I mean to say here is that you prepare and you practice, but without the proper feedback. So, as they say, you can keep doing the wrong thing 1,000 times. And when you do it, probably the next time after the 1,000 times, you will probably end up doing it wrong again. So that's another thing that people don't focus on. They don't focus on getting the right feedback from the right people, from the industry experts. So they keep practicing their answers without knowing whether they're actually answering correctly, whether they're on the right path. So that is basically what I would say is one of the reasons before the interview itself when people actually fail. So you're not really preparing yourself, correctly. Now let's dive deep a little bit during the interview process. So for me, actually, there are three things that I would like to highlight that goes wrong, especially when you're in the interview process. And that's where I think what Naveen mentioned does play a little bit of part, the peer pressure that comes in, right? Because, once you get there, as much as you know that you're the right person for this job, when you see everyone around you, suddenly you feel like, oh my God, everyone is like so much better than I am. And then you suddenly don't believe in yourself and you start questioning every single thing. Maybe my teeth is not correct. So this is one question that I used to get all the time, especially for cabin crew. My skin is not good, my teeth is not good, this and that, and I don't know whether I can clear the interview. And I tell people all the time, and if you're going to use this later as a video, you could do that. I keep showing people my lower teeth and I keep telling them, look at my teeth. They're not in the best aligned position, but I still made it, and I was a trainer, I was a recruiter. So if I could do it, you could do it too. So that's the first thing. People actually stop believing in themselves because of the peer pressure they see. The second thing is people don't really know how to deal with these fears the right way. A lot of times when you go to the interview, people will tell you, don't be nervous, don't be nervous. But honestly, if you ask me, I tell my candidates, please be nervous. You've got to be nervous, But you've got to understand how to deal with that nervousness, because if you're not going to be nervous, you're going to be overconfident, and you don't want to do that. But you've got to know how to deal with it the right way. And last is, for most people, an interview is a Q&A session. Like for now, this is like an interview, right? You're asking me a question and I'm answering. So for most people, it becomes like a Q&A session. We just focus on answering questions. We don't focus on building rapport. We don't focus on saying things that the interviewers would want to listen, or probably something that would make them engage in having a conversation with us. So as small as, saying something in the end that would probably make the person that you're talking to ask you the question that you want them to ask, like a leading question and things like that. So that is something that people don't focus on during the interview. So those would be the three things that I would say plays a major role as to why people fail in interviews. And of course, when we talk about the after part of it, is again back to basics. You come back from an interview, you don't know what went wrong, you don't know who to reach out to get the right feedback, and you just keep practicing the wrong thing again and again, and you keep going through the loop. So you practice the wrong thing, you go back in an interview, you do the wrong thing, and then it follows suit. So that's what I believe is like a loop that people go through when they actually fail in interviews, and they progressively keep failing in interviews. I'm done.
So, Nidhi, wonderful observations, and you covered the aspects of not customizing the answers to a particular airline, or when someone is giving an interview with a particular company, they are going with the same mindset. So that is one observation. And other than that, you also mentioned about focusing on the body language aspect and all. So these are all something which are things not going well. But now let me flip the question a little bit and talk about what are certain scenarios wherein you are really impressed by the candidates where they did perfectly well or amazingly well.
Yeah, I think here would be a best time to maybe share some of the experiences from my students who actually cleared the interviews, rather than falling back on my personal experiences back from recruitment, because it's been a long time that I have been in an interview room taking interviews. But I do have a lot of my students who come back and share a lot of their experiences. So let me start off with one of the examples. So Singapore Airlines is famously known for not taking people who are older in age. Okay, like they usually like to take people who are younger in age. But I do have a student who actually cleared the interview, and this is his, I think, second or third try, and he was 31 years old. So it's quite an impressive thing to be able to do that, especially for a male candidate, to be able to clear that interview at that particular age. And basically what he shared with me when he came back was he was just having an impromptu conversation with the interviewers. A lot of times interviewers tend to ask you impromptu questions because they just want to gauge your communication skills. When you have to do some sort of conversation with people, how would you actually respond? And a lot of people actually think too much about it. They dive so deep into it thinking, oh my God, if I say this, it's going to be wrong. If I say that, it's going to be wrong. So he was just having impromptu conversations, and that is something that I teach as part of visualization technique to my students as to how you can have impromptu conversations. So that was a very outstanding thing that really helped him clear his interview. Another actually student shared with me that after failing quite a number of times, so this person is 26 years old and he applied for Qatar Airways, and after failing a couple of times with domestic airlines, I decided to go international. This was his first time trying for international airlines. And from the start, even before he was getting into the interview, he told me, you know what, I'm going to come back and tell you that I made it. it. So you just wait for my call and I'm going to come back and tell you that I made it. So that's the call that you should wait for. So that's the kind of belief that he or she had in himself, that made him really stand out. So going back to your question, Naveen, when a candidate is a star candidate is when they actually give you everything that you want to see in a package, especially that first impression, how you're building rapport with your body language, how are you actually building rapport with your style of communication, how are you actually going out of your way to engage with your interviewers, how are you impressing me with your personality, how are you actually not just, making it like an interview session, but actually an interactive session at the end of the day. So all those small key things really play a huge role to spot that star candidate amongst everyone else.
Excellent, Nidhi. So the first impression, engagement, packaging, and self-confidence are the 4 things that you talked about. So in the interview, in the initial introduction, Naveen talked about one component of peer pressure. Especially you are going for mass recruitment drives. So how to handle peer pressure in these mass recruitment drives that happen? Because unlike the one-on-one sessions, in these, you always compare yourself with the person sitting next to you. Hey, he has better smile. Hey, she has better accent. Hey, the opposite person seems to be more confident. So how to take care of this peer pressure?
That's a really good question and something that I love to cover in my coaching classes, because one thing which I think it's very personal as well, because when you dive a little bit deeper, I'm actually an NLP coach as well. So when we dive into fears, we become very, very personal as to how to deal with certain fears. But going back to generically answering this question, in fact, I've made a video on this recently, which is on my YouTube, where I've talked about a 5-step process as to how you can actually handle peer pressure, especially when it comes to mass hiring. And the first step in that process is preparation, right? The one that I was talking about, but preparation with the right feedback. So you've got to prepare the right way with the right feedback. That is really, really important. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing the wrong thing over and over again. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, believing in yourself, which is just knowing that there is more right with you than there is more wrong with you. A lot of people just focus on, there is more wrong with me. Why not just focus on the fact that there is more right with me? I'm an individual person. I have a unique personality. I have a unique identity. Just focusing on that itself really makes a huge, huge difference. And third, which is one of my favorite, a lot of people compare themselves, as you just mentioned, Sudhakar, they compare with people on their right and to their left. So a lot of people compare for the purpose of self-evaluation. What I suggest people to do is to compare for the purpose of self-enhancement. So just stop evaluating yourself from that perspective. If someone is wearing something that looks great, I'm going to walk up to that person. I'm going to ask that person, where did you get that from? Maybe I want to wear it in my next interview. Instead of actually focusing on, hey, you look better than me. I should have done that. That's okay. Done and dusted. Move on and then go and find out. And, self-enhance yourself instead of self-evaluating yourself. So that's the purpose of comparison. And of course, feeding yourself with positive thoughts is really, really important. So, as part of our coaching, we do this thing called anchoring, which is a component of neuro-linguistic programming. You can anchor yourself to feel a certain way based on how you program your subconscious. Have you guys heard of anchoring before, by the way? Have you guys heard of NLP and anchoring before?
NLP, yeah. The use of, psychology with strategy and technique, which drives the positive result, right?
Yes. So in a layman language, neuro-linguistic program is actually training your subconscious to work for you on a conscious level. So, neuro, brain, language, linguistic language, and programming is basically how you program your subconscious. So there are a lot of techniques that we could incorporate to train your subconscious to work for you in a certain way. As simple as when we start driving, we're so focused on when to press the accelerator and when to press the brake. But after 6 months, we can actually multitask. We can take a phone call, we can press the accelerator, we can press the brake, and we don't even, have to think twice about it. So you're basically programming your subconscious, and that is NLP. So you could actually influence your subconscious using certain techniques, and anchoring is one of them. So you can anchor yourself to feel a certain way with a sense of touch, with a sense of smell, with a sense of hearing, or a sense of sight, and things like that. So one of the things that we do with our students is basically to advise them to wear a certain perfume, when they're actually in an interview. And they just don't wear it on the day of the interview, but they have to start wearing it before the interview. And they have to, start associating that perfume with positive thoughts. So every time they feel positive, every time they're in a place where they feel positive, they feel great, they're basically wearing that perfume. And that kind of builds on that experience. So when you're in an interview and you're wearing that perfume, you actually suddenly get into that zone where you feel really, really good about yourself. You feel really positive. Our sense of touch. Sometimes when you're really nervous, I tell my students to touch yourself in a certain way. Like, I do this. I have a habit of doing this. So this is like my confidence touch. So when I do this basically sparks like a confidence sort of thing in me. So this is like anchoring yourself to touch yourself in a certain way, but you have to base it on experiences. So that's anchoring. That is something that we teach our students to feel positive, especially when they're really feeling nervous. And I think last and the most important thing is just focusing on your key skills and also, just taking note of all your achievements, because a lot of times freshers especially who come to me and they tell me, I don't have any work experience. How am I supposed to, compete with someone who has work experience? And that's the first thing that I tell them. I tell them, and that's the question that I ask them. I ask them, what's your age? And most people will tell me, like, 19, 20, 21. So I'll be like, right there is 15 years of life experience. So you're telling me that in the last 15 years, you never actually negotiated anything with your parents? You're telling me in the last 15 years, you never influenced your parents to get you what you wanted? In the last 15 years, you never made a decision? These are some of the key skills that we need most of the times, basic key skills that we need when we go for interviews. And right there, people don't fall back on those. Your life experiences are your work experiences, just that you have to dig in a little bit deeper and, find your own achievements. And that is the database that you need to have when you're going for those interviews. So those are the 5 things that I would recommend to focus on to deal with that peer pressure when you're at the interview.
Those are amazing tips, Nidhi. One thing that really stuck to my mind is about self-enhancement and thinking positively about self, not worrying about what others are going to think about it, and also training our subconscious so that we are trying to induce the positive thoughts all the time. Great conversation. So we have been having very serious conversations so far. I would like to add some fun to this. And are you ready for a quick rapid fire round where I'm going to ask you a few questions and you can crisply answer them? All right, so let me fire the very first bullet. Where would you go from a Doraemon's magic door?
Definitely to pre-COVID times. That's where I want to go back to.
Yeah, that's a very creative answer. So going to the second one very quickly. So if you are given $10 million, how would you spend them in a day?
That's a lot of money. Oh, wow. I would spend it on a lot of different things. And I think one of the first things that would probably come to me is to work with some sort of orphanage and dog charity, because that is something that I feel really, really closely related to. I always wanted to build an orphanage and, get people who can't really, don't have parents and things like that, or who just wanted education and things like that. So that's something that I would definitely work towards. And dogs, yes. The love of my life is my dog, Hibiki. So I would definitely want to work with some sort of dog charity. The rest, I think I'll plan it along the way. I think my mom is a better financial planner. Maybe I'm going to get her to work with the rest of the money to figure out what we should do with it.
Here comes the next one. What is the best gift that you have ever given to someone?
I would like to think unconditional love. I'm someone who believes in the concept of unconditional love, and I do that to my family. And I do that to my community, to my Insta followers, to my YouTube followers who ask me questions. There's so many times people ask me so many questions, and sometimes people are going for interviews and they don't have the time to actually hop on to the coaching class, because coaching class obviously takes time and effort, and sometimes they reach out to me saying that they have an interview next day. So I'm quite open to actually sharing tips, and even though I could just as simply say go watch my YouTube videos, but I'll take time out to actually interact with them, to ask them what's the interview, and if I could share some tips so that they could be a little bit personal to them, so that they could actually clear their interview. So I think that is something that I feel is the best gift that I give.
Wonderful. Moving on. What's your take on a 4-day work week?
I think, Sudhakar, fall back on what I was just saying earlier. I believe in 7 days work a week. I am a workaholic. I love working. If given a choice, I want to work 7 days a week. I don't think people should work 4 days a week. It's a waste of time.
So it's a wrong question to Nidhi. All right, moving on to the next one. This question, I think it's very tricky one for a ex-cabin crew member. Do you go for a branded product or look for value for money?
Actually, it's both. And for me, I think the choice was a little bit simple. So anything over here is branded. Anything below here wasn't branded. So my shoes are usually not branded, but my handbags are branded. So most of the makeup stuff that I put, what goes in my hair, my jewelry is usually branded. But yeah, anything that's at the bottom is not really branded because mostly people see what's on the top. So that's where I make the first impression.
Wonderful. Again, one more dose of creativity. So one last question for this rapid fire round. Do you think there are intelligent aliens in our galaxy?
I'll be really honest, and this is what I feel. Anybody who dares to be different is considered an alien in our community these days. But again, it's very perspective because some aliens are intelligent and some aren't. So if you dare to be different, just do it, I think, in a more intelligent manner. And that's what I would say to that question. But yeah, anybody who dares to be different, I feel, is an alien these days.
Amazing, Nidhi. After that quick rapid fire discussion, one final question for this session. What is your one piece of advice to those aspiring to make big in their careers?
Apart from, the things that I've mentioned about believing in yourself and, practicing with the right feedback and all the other things that we've talked about, there's just one practical tip that I want to share with everyone, which I feel, especially from an interview perspective, is very, very necessary. And this is one step that we miss out all the time. Whenever you are preparing for your interview, and I believe that question is pertaining to the interview, Sudhakar, so that's why I'm answering that question from that perspective. Get yourself a checklist on anything that you want to work with, because people start working on things without knowing what they want to work on. We will start working on our grooming, we will start working on our communication skills, we will start working on this, we will start working on that, but we don't really know what are we working on. So this is one thing that I work with all the times, and I do have a checklist on my website if anybody wants to go and find out. It's called Ace Your Interview Checklist. It's like a basic checklist for anybody who wants to ace their interviews, which incorporates things that you should fall back on to begin with. So that is one thing that you should do. So have a checklist for every single thing that you want to work on, and not just like a broad checklist, but small checklist for everything, and that really keeps you in check when it comes to your progress when you're preparing for your interviews. So that would be my one piece of advice, apart from everything else that I've advised earlier.
Excellent. So for the benefit of our audience, in our interview script, you will find all the links pertaining to the checklist that Nidhi has referred in this whole conversation. Please follow our YouTube channel where we will be sharing all these details. So Nidhi, it was an amazing discussion, passionate, full of power, and a couple of things that I will remember for long. One, ensure that you have that anchoring. So have that positive thoughts, and I really learned something that it can be even a DO or even a touch. Second thing, focus on key skills. Third thing, believe in yourself. And the most important thing that you gave in one word, create a checklist, at least that will give you directionally where you are going, what you are racing against. Thank you for that amazing conversation on cracking interviews and dealing the peer pressure, especially in mass recruitment drives. We really appreciate you taking time for us, and our audience are going to love this conversation and are going to immensely get benefited with all the knowledge that you shared. Thank you.
Great. Thank you once again. And vice versa. I mean, I did go through a couple of videos on your podcast, and I did listen to them. And I think there is amazing industry experts who've shared their knowledge. So thank you for creating the platform where people can actually come and share their knowledge, and from there they could reach out to masses. So yeah, that's a great work out there for both Sudhakar and Naveen. And thank you once again for having me on your platform. Actually, there's one more thing that I wanted to thank you for. Naveen wasn't here earlier. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you to hearing to my interns, because I believe it was not a direct conversation. My interns reach out to you, and this is a small project and a challenge that I was running for my interns, that I wanted to develop their confidence in people's skills. And that's why we asked them to reach out to different people who are, doing podcasts, and see if they can converse with them and see how they can actually, get us to do this podcast together. So I really appreciate that you actually, gave them an opportunity. It really, really did boost their confidence and, instill a lot of belief in themselves that, they can actually reach out to people and have that kind of people skills. That's something that we need when it comes to interviews. So that's one of the challenges that we were running. So thank you once again for entertaining them.
You're welcome. And thanks for being part of the Guiding Voice purpose of shaping lives and careers of millions across the globe. Thanks once again. And folks, if you have liked this episode, please share with at least 3 of your friends or colleagues for whom you care for. Because the Guiding Voice podcast series is a purely not-for-profit venture, and our team puts in a lot of effort to bring the best conversations to all our listeners. And our purpose is very clear. We want to provide curated guidance to all the professional students out there, be it from engineering, B schools, and all the IT employees and entrepreneurs, so that all of you can make informed decisions based on the insights that are driven by the industry experts, coaches, leaders, or academicians across the globe. Because if you share this with your friends, it helps them also learn great insights from every episode. Or if you're listening to the Guiding Voice podcast on the Apple podcast, please do not forget to leave a review and a 5-star rating, because every rating will help us expand our reach and contribute to our mission to shape the careers and lives of millions of people across the globe. And if you are watching the episode on YouTube, please do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And last but not the least, I want to reiterate, please share with at least 3 of your friends or colleagues. Thank you so much in advance. Alright, so it brings us to the trivia segment of today's episode. And today's trivia is about QWERTY keyboard. QWERTY is one of the most popular keyboard models that is available in the market today. And the question for today's episode is, do you know the largest word that can be typed using a single top row of a QWERTY keyboard? So folks, I know you have started thinking, but as per the ritual, let me reveal the answer. The largest word that can be written by using a single top row of a traditional QWERTY keyboard is typewriter. And some believe that it's the inventor Christopher Scholz did it purposefully to demonstrate something, the significance of typewriter. Interesting, isn't it? Thank you for listening. There is more in store, folks. Stay tuned. Take care. Be safe. Until next time. Bye-bye. And we are signing off for today.